Some content or topics discussed could trigger a past anxiety or be sensitive or disturbing to listen to or view. Please view and listen with caution. Hi, my name is Todd Blyleven. I'm one of the hosts of the Walking Tall podcast, and it's our mission to help all people that are down and depressed or dealing with some sort of trauma or mental health issue to learn how to stand back up and walk tall again in their lives. Please follow us on all of our social platforms, our YouTube channel, and check out our Walking Tall movement at www.walkingtallmovement.com. Now, here's our show.
Welcome back to the Walking Tall podcast. If you've been with us since the beginning of season 2, you've known that we've had great conversation around various topics regarding mental health. We've also got an opportunity to catch up on our summers and all the activities we've been doing in lieu of filming shows. But today we're going to take a different route of mental health, and we're going to speak specifically to the marketing aspect of it. I believe earlier on I mentioned our presence at the Mental Health Marketing Conference in Franklin, Tennessee at the end of September, and all of that opportunity it provided our movement. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity once again for us to welcome Steve Turney from the Mental Health Marketing Conference to discuss how mental health is now marketed. But before we welcome him on, Dr. LaRosa, we were talking backstage, and I was asking you about Helping Hands and all the great work you've done and continue to do with that organization, and how you marketed your own efforts when you were the owner of that organization. And you had some funny comments that I think we'll get to a little bit later. But before we welcome Steve, is there anything you want to just really highlight quickly about marketing as it relates to mental health?
Well, as you know, and as I said, when I started Helping Hands in 2004, I didn't really have a budget for marketing, and we didn't really do any marketing at all. It was all word of mouth. We really grew locally here in Long Island, New York. And I have seen a tremendous, tremendous push in the marketing arena in the past few years, particularly since COVID, for mental health services, various companies assisting practices in growing their client base. A lot of online therapy groups have popped up, and a lot of resources for parents, a lot of digital marketing in terms of just providing materials for parents about various aspects of childhood disorders and other sorts of things, in my network. So I have absolutely seen a lot going on online and in social media on just various ways to try to help practices grow and change and sort of attract clientele that will help support the growth of new and developing practices.
Yeah, no, it's a great insight there. And what I think also has brought mental health to the forefront, aside from your great point of COVID, Dr. LaRosa, is, similar to Todd in mine's experience of mass violence and the high incidence of crime in our nation and things of that sort, and the mental health hurdles that provides. And so, Todd, being a marketing expert that you are yourself in the corporate space, and having worked in corporate sports and now with the Scout Hub and all the great work you're doing, I'm excited to hear your take on the marketing aspect of mental health, because as I said, it's not hawking a product. You're not selling a widget. You're not trying to get somebody to buy a shirt. Lives are on the line. And, yours and mine have also been on the line in many ways. And so as a professional you are, I'm excited just to get your high level take, and then we'll get Steve on the show.
Yeah, I think, when you're launching a product, say, for example, a mouth guard into an industry, there's a lot of thought process that goes into what type of target identification, demographics, print, you're building all the quality videos, the social posts, and you're building these campaigns right before you launch this product. And if we start thinking about the product that we're delivering on a mental health capacity and identifying the target audience on who that's speaking to, I think, it can become more streamlined. But in the mental health space, as we've all seen, a lot of times we're just getting out and sharing our story, and we're relying on social media to amplify to everybody, because mental health is all about everyone, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's probably the one part that I've seen where I think we can be a little bit better, not just from the Walking Tall movement side, because we're in that fight to spread positive vibes and energy and create this movement of letting people know they're not alone. So social media is huge, right? SEO, getting funding to be able to amplify your messages of positivity is huge. You talk to even first responder groups and what they're doing and how they're trying to promote the positivity, even to spouses of first responders and family members, that is so underserved. Even getting into law enforcement or becoming an athlete or becoming an executive or owning your own business, your spouses go through things too, or your family, on like what to expect. That's all mentally challenging. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just probably trying to hone in a little bit more on where you're going to target that specific post instead of just broadcasting it. Because in our mind, when we say something, everybody should hear it. Yep. But that's not, unfortunately, the way all algorithms are working now, especially if you put up an ad on social, it's never going to go anywhere. Yep. So to be more organic, I think, is where what I'm seeing, especially everything you're doing, Chris, with just the promotion of it. It's so like heartfelt. It's not addy. You're not putting addy words into it. You're just telling stories. And that's why our movement's growing, so I think it just has to probably fall back on that more personal piece.
Yeah, no, it is growing, and it's growing with the helps of folks like Steve Turney. And so, Todd, if you would bring him on, I'd be so excited for us and our guests and our listeners to meet him. But as we welcome him on, he is the CEO of the Mental Health Marketing Conference based out of Franklin, Tennessee. We're so honored to have him not only as a guest of the Walking Tall, but to be as forward as he's been and to be passionate about the mental health space as he is. And so wanting and desiring to better the world through his work at the Mental Health Marketing Conference. And so, Todd, let's let Steve in and we'll get to know him and hear all about the conference. And we'll get to rapid fire some questions at him as we get to learn about marketing in the mental health space.
All right, here we go.
Ding dong.
The first one, season 2.
There it is. All right, there he is. Steve, he's not pacing, which is a good sign. But Steve, we, you didn't get to hear the open of the show, and we were just talking briefly about each of our backgrounds in marketing in a sense. And I was just discussing the amazing event that I was fortunate enough to attend at the end of September. Not just any event, it's your event, frankly, the Mental Health Marketing Conference out of Franklin, Tennessee. And just to see that congregation of professionals who are doing great work to break the stigma, and you at the top of the totem pole and being our guest is just such an honor. So if you don't mind, please let folks know who you are, where you came from, how you got started, all things mental health marketing, and Steve Turney. And then we'll take it easy on you with some questions.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm excited to be here. I'm part Cherokee, actually, and I love that phrase, the totem pole you mentioned, because actually the most powerful character is at the bottom of the totem pole. And we always think it's the top, like the eagle or whatever we see at the top, but it's actually like the foundation. So it is an honor. It's humbling and an honor to try to be a part of setting a tone in a group of people through my actions and my words that really provides a hospitable, welcoming, warm place where there are no outsiders. You're a speaker, you're a sponsor, you're an attendee. Great. I don't care. You're a human in this room, and let's start to connect around some big topics that are bigger than any of us. So it was awesome to meet you there, Chris, Dr. LaRosa, and Todd. I can't wait to meet you both in person. But thanks for having me on.
Yeah. No, when you say welcoming and it doesn't matter who you were, where you came from, what you looked like, what you were eating, the list goes on and on. It was one of the more welcoming environments at a conference that I've ever been in. Having been at baseball conferences and Parks and Rec, and I'm sure Dr. Rosa, you've attended many as well. You sense cliques, and you sense I don't necessarily fit in with that keynote speaker, or that person's too prominent for me to approach. That was not the environment at the Mental Health Marketing Conference. Everybody was welcoming, no matter who you are, where you were, how many speeches you gave. So, Steve, I'm anxious to hear, how did you come up with this idea? Where did where did all this come to be?
Yeah, totally. And just to follow on that point, I think a lot of conferences are what I would consider very yang, like very, I mean, it's like, and rather very, very yang in terms of like the approach to let's try to cram as much stuff in our brains as possible. We take a very, clinical or quant based or objective brain work, and you come out of those things so exhausted. I've been to hundreds of conferences, probably like you all. And you can swing the pendulum too far, at least in terms of what I'm trying to do. We're not trying to design like a Costa Rica ayahuasca, summit up to the mountains and into the
Although
clouds
that would be
kind of
fun.
thing.
That
It
would
would
be
be,
fun.
well, nothing wrong with that. Like I'd be interested in doing that. There's a time and place for that. But for us, we're trying to walk this line of the line between those two extremes and have a head and a heart conference that focuses on caring for the human. And so we were thrilled to have you all come in, because it's just one of those very, very human aspects of lived experience, which is simply sort of like the stories that we choose to tell, and stories are so powerful, the hero's journey and all of that. But I didn't found the conference. Actually, I have a friend, Austin, who had a serious relationship with a girl. I think it was long distance, and along the way she discovered she was having some bipolar disorder challenges in her life, and he walked with her for a long time through that, got her some help with friends and family. Ultimately they did break up, and then and he realized that was very new to him, and this was 9 or 10 years ago. So a very different conversation has taken place in the last decade. But his very next relationship, the girl had basically a psychotic break, like schizophrenia, essentially. And it really put him on his heels and exposed his ignorance. And that's a great place to be in terms of a beginner's mindset. And he's an amazing community builder, awesome human being, smart marketer. And so he started a conversation, not intending it to be an annual national conference, but he started where he was in Nashville, and I wasn't involved. And he said, like a week before the conference was supposed to go, there were maybe 12 people signed up, and it was all his friends and family. And I think
That's how it starts.
It's how it starts. It's a little acorn, acorns are oak trees. It's just a different format given time and nurturing. So he pushed that rock for like 3 or 4 or 5 years, because eventually like 100 people came to that first event. He leaned into Nashville, which is a wonderful town and healthcare hub. And fast forward, I turned 40 and I went to a monastery for a silent retreat and came away. There's a longer story I'd love to tell you sometime, not here, but I came away with this message or idea of help people in need. Like if you looked at my life as a pie chart, there was a slice of pie missing. And so I came back from that, and again, starting small, like starting at the core, clumsy, started to fill up people's cars with gas if I saw them broken down or stopping. And that was in itself enlightening, like, oh, nothing happened except good things and new relationships. And so I did that, and then I pretty quickly realized that the first thing I should do is help myself. I was struggling with career and kind of bouncing around companies, so totally under the guise of career guidance, I went to a licensed professional counselor in Brentwood, Tennessee, which is in between Nashville and Franklin. And we quickly got into shame and lies and family and all of that good stuff, the real hard yards. And then I felt these scales fall off my eyes, and I could embrace other people's lies because I was telling myself the truth, and I could live with them in that tension without judgment. And it started to be something that astounded me. Like I could just see whether it was lies or just experiences, I had a new filter, or less of a filter rather, on reality. And then I was having coffee with Austin, my good buddy, and And I think he had a baby on the way and leg surgery coming up, and kind of bemoaning the fact that he's going to have to do this conference again. Although he loved it, it was definitely a labor of love. And those words just fell out of my mouth, like, "Oh, how can I help?" And he said, "If you can book the speakers." And I had done that for previous associations, industry associations, mostly in marketing. And he said, "If you could book the sponsors." And I had done that for a really good healthcare marketing agency called Revive Health that's been purchased by Weber Shandwick, which is part of the IPG network. And so I jumped into that work, and that was late 2018. We shipped a good 2019 conference, certainly a lot of learning curve for me climbing that mountain. And then 2020, I'm kind of ready to go. And then, of course, we know what happens in 2020. And so we pivot fully virtual. A bunch of people show up because tickets are free, and people need this content more than ever. And then 2021, again, I'm excited to get back into it. And Austin is realizing that his path is going a different way. So you probably met Austin. He co-hosted this year. We're great friends. But he's doing amazing stuff with board game development, like global amazing stuff. And it is a heavy lift to run a conference. And so he stepped back, I stepped forward, and we postponed 2021. We were midstream. And so 2022, I call our Phoenix Rising moment. We had the global head of mental health from YouTube come out from San Francisco to Nashville. We had amazing support. And I could just tell the market was still hungry for this, because that was my big question: do we need this anymore? There's challenges with access, and we don't know about outcomes in some regards, and what are we doing here? And it was absolutely validated 100%. And so I leaned into 2023 even harder, full time, and we shipped a really neat event, bigger than ever in every way across all our KPIs. We had a lot of success, but it really is about the fact that this conversation is so critical to be having.
Yeah, you said so many things there that I wanted to stop and ask, but I didn't want to cut you off. And something that resonated with me before I turn it to you, Dr. LaRosa, you said, an acorn is still an oak tree. And, that just gave me hope for the Walking Tall movement, right? I'm thinking to ourselves how we are and how we're growing at such a rapid rate with the help of folks like yourself, Steve. And Dr. LaRosa, we were speaking offline a little about how the marketing aspect of mental health has evolved, and you made some comments earlier on in the show. But Steve, if you don't know, Dr. LaRosa started her own clinic and was making light of how she didn't have a marketing budget, and there was really no online presence, and it was all word of mouth. So I would love to hear your take so far, Dr. LaRosa, on how this evolution of mental health marketing, particularly the conference, has taken shape.
Well, I just want to say that I'm touched and inspired by the overwhelming feeling that you had to help people and to venture down that journey, because I feel that once we get that inspiration, and once I believe, as Todd and Chris, that there are greater powers and divine intervention on many levels that inspire us to use our gifts here on earth to help and inspire others. And I think back to when I was in my 20s, actually, and I was working a whole heck of a lot, in the field that I do. And I worked for a period of time with a group of senior citizens with dual diagnoses, mental illness, as well as some sort of intellectual disability. And I was part of a clinical staff. And I got to know these fantastic people. The senior population in and of themselves are just a joy to be around for me, always have been. But the unique aspects of each one of these individuals led me to a place where I saw how happy it made them to show off their talents. And so we arranged an in-house talent show. And to see them up there performing and feeling good about themselves, even just for a few hours, was the inspiration that kept me going for months and months and months in a very difficult job that I had at the time. And from these thoughts and experiences and knowing that I was touching people on a real level, I started to listen to parents, and I started to listen to needs and desires. And I knew that parents of children with disabilities yearn for that moment where their child is up on the stage in a talent show, or where their artwork is highlighted on the walls, or when they get a note home from the teacher to say they had a really great day and they helped out a friend. And so my drive and inspiration was to develop a program where kids, regardless of the level of their disability or how complex their needs, they could come on a weekend and they could experience art and music and dance and cooking and pet therapy and all kinds of fun things, that they would produce some sort of project. And we all know from the children that we have, and Steve, I'm not sure if you have children or loved ones in your family that will give you these wonderful presents made of macaroni chips and pieces of paper, but we love them dearly regardless of what they look like, right? And, you know, one of my goals for my program was to have something that a child would give to their parent each and every Saturday that they spent with us. And over time, I got to live off those smiles and those tearful moments that parents would have feeling these things that they all deserve to feel. And it's just a matter of tapping in to those children and to all people, and to bring out their strengths and their qualities so that others can experience them, however small those steps are. And so my life really just was devoted to giving these moments to people and helping these individuals as much as I possibly could over years. I had no marketing expertise, no marketing help, you know, and back in the early 2000s, when I started all this, marketing was nothing of what it is today. Social media was nothing of what it is today. And so I didn't know anything of it. So we really just grew word of mouth. And, you know, we have a pretty dense population here, you know, on Long Island. And so there was never a lack of clients, you know, but I say that since I sold my company in 2019, now we've progressed into Helping Hands Family, and we have 29 different locations. The marketing team is, I have no words for how fantastic they are. And if you've seen anything on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook, the posts that they put up are real. You know, these are our real registered behavior technicians. These are our real clinical staff, and the happiness and joy that they all feel, the beauty of the clinics, the comfort level of the families. It all just shows so beautifully and organically, as you said before, Todd. I couldn't be more proud of the team and the work that they're all doing. I can take zero credit for it because I have absolutely no expertise.
Well,
but I do believe, as Todd said, when we are marketing anything having to do with helping human beings in any part of mental health, it must be true, it must be organic, it must come from a place of experience and expertise, or the message is not going to be believable.
Yeah, and Dr. LaRosa, you know, you may not have realized it, but as I was listening to you speak, you were actually doing a form of organic marketing early on. Those projects that your participants were bringing back home to their families was a marketing tactic in itself, because it resonates and it shows the value that you were providing to others' lives. And so, give yourself a little more credit than you will. That was a good marketing ploy, if you will. But Todd, I consider you a marketing expert, and you know, we talk a lot about mental health. And you know, the perspective I'm eager to hear from you, not only based on your marketing expertise and how you've done great work selling items, but you know, when you've gone through your journey of EMDR, as you talk about it, and your mental health you know, journey, as you will, how have you been to, what resonated with you, where have you stood when it comes to this topic related to mental health?
Well, I think, you know, first of all, Steve, what you were talking about with, you know, low man on the totem pole, that is the foundation of anything, right? Sometimes we need to be knocked down to the bottom to be able to understand how we can start to lift and be a support. So I love that comment. But yeah, I think, you know, for me, getting into, you know, the transition into EMDR, where I really was able to open up my own heart. I mean, I wasn't raised to share my emotions. I was raised to suppress everything, right? Be as tough as you can, be as strong as you can. If you're hurt on the inside, you don't share that stuff. You never want to show any signs of weakness. You know, I was raised in that household. And not to say that my parents were not nurturing or anything else. They were. I mean, they gave us love when we needed it. They were there. It just wasn't it wasn't a common thing to be able to go out and say, hey, you know what, I'm kind of hurting. It was like, the sun's coming up tomorrow. Everyone else has experienced what you've experienced, so get over it, you know. And we've all kind of experienced that, especially in our generation. But what I found, you know, especially after what I went through with my traumatic experience, was a lot of people were reaching out to me, sharing stories of their own hurt. And whether they were telling me because they wanted to, they weren't telling me to compare story to story. It was almost like this, hey, I feel this same relatable experience as what you're feeling. What you're describing with the silence, the hurt, the pain on the inside, the Molotov cocktail of emotions when we go through a traumatic experience, the uplift, who to trust, how to find a therapist, when to find a therapist, like all these questions that you go through. That's what I experienced was law enforcement officers, Secret Service, regular people that I've worked with sharing stories that I had never ever heard before, would never have asked. And I'm getting a 30-second soundbite from someone telling me that they're hurting and they're feeling pain. And so at that point, you realize, like, wow, okay, so my story of sharing how I went through therapy, I couldn't tell my 8 seconds of pain and what I really saw to that particular therapist because I didn't feel the emotional attachment or connection, and how I just kept being resilient and find that one person that became my angel that I could get beyond the 8 seconds, go into the 30 seconds and keep going. And then what EMDR therapy did for me was an absolute godsend. On top of my faith and my connection there, it really empowered me to be able to share more and more. And all of a sudden I was like, wait a second. So if I'm going to just be vulnerable and I'm going to just tell it how it was, all these people are now starting to like relate to it. And now they're telling me their deepest, darkest secrets in their life. And it was like you, Steve, I mean, all of a sudden you have this aha moment where you're uplifted, right? And Vanetta, the same thing. Chris, the same thing. Like we all share that moment. So EMDR was an amazing tool. In fact, the guy that my buddy, you know, one of my, I call him my rocks. He's a retired firefighter up in Northern California. He's the one that turned me on to it. You know, he said, hey, a lot of military, our firefighters go through it. You need to go through that. You need to find someone well, he had never even been through it. Right. So here he is, he's as a high-end, you know, personnel in this really established firefighting city organization. He's telling me to do it. And so finally, what happened about a year and a half ago is he called me up. He said, hey, guess where I'm going? I said, where are you going? He goes, I'm going to get EMDR therapy. Mm-hmm. And I went, oh man, that's awesome. And he said, yeah, he goes, you know, how I was listening to your story. He goes, how can I keep giving advice when I've got my own stuff. And now he'll call me and he'll go, hey, I'm on my way for a tune-up, or I'm going to, you know, so now it's this awesome thing where you're going, yeah, let's go. We're going to talk about it. You know, it's so cool.
Steve, I want to hear your thoughts. You know, what Todd was just saying and what Dr. LaRosa was explaining really resonated with me, right? We at Walking Tall are very big into the lived experience and proving that vulnerability is strength. But you also mentioned something earlier as you were kind of informing us how the mental health marketing conference came to be, about things like KPIs and metrics and all of things. So how do professionally, industry, a marketing perspective, combine those two things that are so important to the mental health aspect of marketing?
Yeah. There's so much here. We have a lot to talk about. I was taking a couple notes just so I would try to remember some things. But to maybe work backwards to that question, Todd, your experience has I think, everything to do with affinity and anti-loneliness, you know, when, and it goes back to Dr. LaRosa's point, that I think we definitely have a calling to care for ourselves, to love ourselves. And, you know, if you imagine that maybe on a vertical axis, I also think we have a requirement or responsibility to care for the community around us, you know, whether that's in our backyard or wherever it is that we find the ability to give and to influence. I think that's one way for like a rich, full life,
That's
in
right.
my experience. And then Todd, I read a lot of Carl Jung, and he, you know, I grew up in a family a little bit like that. My family was very conservative in some ways, and it gave me sort of opportunities to give into that in some ways that maybe were or weren't healthy for me. But Jung says what you resist persists. So, you know, you can try to, I like compare it to holding a surfboard under the water, you know, like hold that thing under the water as long as you can, and watch it break your jaw when it comes up, because you know,
I've had that happen.
you can't fight that forever. It happens, you know. And so we have opportunities to let go of some of that. And then I think yeah, word of mouth, Dr. LaRosa, the way you grew your practice is definitely marketing. We grow our conference that way, and it's a marketing conference. So you would think we would be experts at search engine optimization and ad spend on digital ads on social media and Google and other places. And we're getting better, you know, we're getting more consistent with our email marketing, but it's really conversations like this, or introductions like what Beacon Media and Marketing did when they introduced Chris and me, although we'd been kind of tracking each other on LinkedIn previously.
You were stalking me, Steve. I saw
good
you.
awareness. Yeah, as I do
I'm joking.
on LinkedIn. I live there. And then to make that connection and have, you know, that real affinity and opportunity to do something bigger. And then we do have, you know, especially recent years, for a couple reasons, we have some access challenges where you kind of can hang your shingle out and fill up your books and your panel pretty quickly, with you know, customers or patients or however you talk about them. And that's because I think in part we've really unearthed this kind of latent demand that we weren't talking about before 10 or 20 years ago, similar to what we maybe saw with breast cancer or AIDS, HIV, things like that were not supposed to be talked about in culture, or there was an air of that messaging. And really there again, like what you resist doesn't disappear. If anything, it gets stronger. And so we've seen this kind of tidal wave of mental health conversations. And then the marketing piece comes in, I think, even sometimes as a result of serious mental illness, where the messaging that somebody is giving themselves or that their mind is giving them is, you should stay alone. You shouldn't get care. It's going to be shameful or embarrassing. You don't need a solution like that. So there, in many cases, marketing is simply messaging and strategic messaging that can help reach some people who might be already getting messaging. And then if we look back decades, I mean, I think talk therapy was essentially, you know, by women for women, still, you know, by gender. I think it's 72% of therapists are women, and that's not reflected in the C-suite necessarily. I always love to work on balancing that pendulum shift as well. Right. But you know, it's also Black men, it's also youth. We could talk about segments from a marketing standpoint, and that's simply a picture I paint sometimes is like, imagine you're in Madison Square Garden, and you know, you're on stage and the place is packed, and you have a really critically important message to share, and it's not drink Coca-Cola. It's you need to be caring for your mind and your body, and the comorbidities that can occur, in a number of places with or without sort of our behavioral through line. Some things just happen to us, and we can certainly get our voice to the front rows, but I'm talking about getting our voice to the nosebleeds. And that's when I start to think about social determinants of health. And I start to think about getting the idea and the education around mental health to every single person. There's nobody in that arena that's more or less important based on where they sit.
Yeah, I love that analogy of
Yeah.
getting to the nosebleeds, because, I've said behind the scenes, as Dr. LaRosa and Todd and I have met about moving our organization forward, I've often said, like, I want Walking Tall to meet people where they're at. And it doesn't matter if they're in the nosebleeds or in the front row. I believe that the masses are at sporting events and concerts, all of these types of conferences, and that's where we as Walking Tall need to be, to prove to folks in the masses that vulnerability is strength, that it's okay to have these services and utilize them to your benefit. And so, Dr. LaRosa, hearing what Steve was just saying, I'm sure you're chomping at the bit thinking, oh gosh, I have so much to say. But a question I do have, as I was walking away from Franklin a couple weeks ago, two things stuck out to me with great strength. One is all the folks that I met that shared their story with me, that are marketing professionals, are using their lived experience as the driving motivator towards their passion and their profession, right? They don't always use it as a marketing tool, but their experience is what's driven them to this industry. But then I also say, well, how fair is it when folks like them, who understand the mind maybe better than most, are using marketing tactics to create business for others? And so there's this, to me, this scale that I think has to be really balanced well, so that people aren't being taken advantage of with mental illness in the marketing sector, because it can happen. And we're all buying products we don't need. We're all buying Nikes when we can all wear Payless shoes, right? So, like, how do we balance this in your mind, Dr. LaRosa, when it comes to mental health and marketing?
Well, you're right. I did have so many things that I really wanted to follow.
And I know I just led you astray.
That Steve said. Now you're making my mind go in a completely different direction, which I appreciate, and I will absolutely, support. But that's an interesting question, because marketing professionals do have training in psychology. The importance of psychology is often a key factor for a successful marketing team. For the nosebleeds, for the people out there who really don't have access to quality care, for our inability as a society to care for the whole person, I think that there's still way too many people that not only don't have access, but don't understand where to even begin to look for support. And as Steve was starting to say, they don't even know the steps to take in order to identify with their own mental illness or the beginning stages of a mental illness. This is where I think there's a very big problem to solve. There are people who, at the very beginning stages of schizophrenia, for example, which is a highly insidious onset at a very young age, mostly mid-20s is when, it starts for the most part. Individuals can become so scared and unnerved by the symptoms that they're experiencing. They may begin a road of self-medication. This leads to homelessness, drug addiction, problems that will mask the actual mental illness that could have been treated properly with medication, psychiatry, support, and therapy. But we have a problem in this society where these people are going unnoticed for far too long. All of the incidents of addiction and drug use, need to be given more attention, because a lot of the beginnings of those difficulties stem from some other mental illness. And as Steve was talking about comorbidity, anxiety, depression, ADHD, anxiety, depression, childhood neurodevelopmental disorders, anxiety, depression, OCD, Tourette's, all of these diagnostic criteria can affect a person on a variety of levels that will sort of make them feel as if they have to disengage from society rather than engage. A person who's trying to hide their Tourette's symptoms, for example, at a middle school level because they're being bullied. Well, how are we addressing bullying? How are we addressing acceptance of individuals for all of their differences at a young and broad level? All of these things they're more global aspects of mental health and the care of individuals that need it. It's not just about the diagnosis when someone reaches 20 or 30. It's about all the beginning steps that we need to acknowledge, and we need to find better supports and education for at a community level. So I don't know if I digress too much.
Man, that's great.
No, that
Can I
was
jump in
perfect
on
because,
that?
yeah,
Please,
go ahead,
please.
Steve, and then I want to hear what Todd has to say.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, that's great. There's a book, Healing. It's called Healing by Dr. Thomas Insel, and he ran the National Institute for Mental Health, and he talked about how part of, and not getting political at all, but part of JFK's real Camelot vision was this safety net for national sort of mental health. And you're talking about people who slip through the cracks. Part of that is because we fractured that system down to the state level, and the states were not ready they weren't resourced at all to handle what's become and becoming a crisis, not to mention like substance use disorder or the incredible skyrocketing of fentanyl and other things that just add complexity. But simply talking about that, there are, I think, always going to be some people who are struggling with serious mental illness that need some kind of care that they're not going to be able to necessarily even source for themselves. So that's when you talk about community. One thing we did at the conference was we highlighted the city that we were actually in. It's like, think global, but work local. And we brought in the chief of police and the chief medical officer and talked about drinking. We talked about suicide, and we talked about what they're doing to knit that back together at a community level. And my great hope is that now that we are realizing the amount of demand we have for mental health care and mental illness care, the industry is starting to react. So private equity got real frothy recently, the past 4 or 5 years, putting money into mental health as health systems realize that they've left mental health out in the cold. It's like the last silo in the field way over there. And now they realize, oh, that's actually critically important to the care, the biocare that we're providing is the mental care. So that's good to see. But the number one biggest Inc. 5000 company this year was a mental health company. And so we're seeing that at least there's now incentive, a properly judged incentive in the market for companies to say there is demand, and now we can meet that with supply. And talking economics just real quick, and then I would love to pass it to Todd, is that we're also throttled back, or there's a bottleneck right now of age 42 to 50 clinicians, nurse practitioners, physicians, and that also includes the average age of therapists and providers. And so while we have a belt around that age group providing the care, we have a big sort of hourglass shape of people older and younger than that cohort. So it's a very tough time right now, but that's going to change. So that's going to wash through, and people are still going to school to provide care, and technology companies are thinking about new and better ways to certainly provide some kind of fractional or virtual mental care without doing harm to the person, have it be a net positive experience. So there's lots of exciting adjustments happening in the market, even in the last 10 years, not to mention the last 20 years.
Yeah, no, so you said something, Todd. I'm really curious to hear your opinion and thoughts on this. I know you probably have many after hearing the conversation, but Steve mentioned, that states weren't really ready or prepared to take on the load of the care necessary in each of their states related to mental health. Did I hear that correctly, Steve? As it got fractured. And so, firsthand, I could attest to the fact that Illinois or even Highland Park was not prepared for the trauma that was induced on their community after my experience. And so I'm witnessing that firsthand, is how do you facilitate and foster proper care for folks like us who've experienced something traumatic as we have. But, Todd, how have you felt hearing this conversation? You're putting your marketing hat on, your mental health advocacy hat, your inspirational speaking hat, like all of these things. Like, how are you combining this conversation, and what are your takeaways so far?
Well, I think, first of all, Steve, thank you for doing what you're doing. Really, it's making an impact. I think your conference, unfortunately, Dr. LaRosa and I were not able to attend, hoping that next year. But I think what you're doing in just spreading such a positive experience for people to really come out, and whether you're an introvert or extrovert, you're allowing people to have communication and feel like their voice is heard. And I think that's super powerful. So thank you for everything you're doing. I think we can tell stories of adversity, but this is awesome because we're really getting an understanding of how the dynamic of marketing business, the mental health business piece is happening, the people that are behind the push, like yourself, that are really making impacts. And I love what you said about the local piece, because that's really where it starts. And in my experience, going through the mass shooting in Las Vegas and seeing how the city of Las Vegas rallied up the support, obviously similar to, and I'm not trying to compare the casualty rate, of course, to 9/11, which was another, traumatic, huge experience that we've all dealt with on a national level and a global level. Vegas was really, that was a extremely impactful moment for everybody across our country, across our globe, that something like that could happen to that many people in that type of situation. And the way Vegas rallied up, the support that Vegas gave, they were not prepared, but man, they adapted and they made every single person make sure that you were taken care of. And still today, I still get emails all the time from their resilience center. They're just showing their love. They care about where you are. Hey, we've got the anniversary of the shooting coming up. We want everyone to know we've got these resources, and they've gotten better and better, opposed to, like, and I'm not talking every local community has outreach, but if you're not in that particular area, you don't live in that area, and you live somewhere else, you're coming into a space where maybe it wasn't as impacted, right? My community was not impacted. Unfortunately, we had a shooting in Allen, Texas. Allen's, a few miles down the road from us. We were deeply impacted. Now, North Texas understands as far as what that was. South Texas understands what that feels like, right? So there's more community outreach, the churches, the law enforcement, the fire, more training, everything comes in after the moment. So if we can get to a point where nationally we're starting to educate our older generation, I guess I consider myself an older generation.
Totally.
Right?
Yes, he is. Yes,
on how we can associate with our younger kids that are coming up and aren't afraid to say, hey,
well,
I'm hurt.
Let's talk about that too.
Yeah.
I mean, because there's like ACEs, like adverse childhood experiences, there's this bending, and then there is this breaking, unfortunately. So you experience 6 or more ACEs in your childhood, and you have statistically, we're just talking the physics and statistics of it. You have, if you spin the big wheel of life, a very different outcome. So it's unfortunate that, and I say this with all respect, but we hear this line, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. There's also the case to be made for what doesn't kill you doesn't make you stronger, but it does kill other people. And then there's this window of opportunity to say, wow, life is very different than it used to be, and how am I going to react to that? And that's what I celebrate with what you all are doing, because to use an analogy, like, let's say you're trying to build muscle mass, that's your goal. You add 2% a week, and at the end of 1 year, you're 100% stronger than you were 1 year ago. And what you all are doing is saying, this happened. I accept that this is the reality, and what am I going to do about it? And in my own story, in my own lived experience, it's the same reality I had to come to, which was to say in therapy, okay, what if I need to take responsibility for my life in extreme ways as much as possible, given that I do have this gift of a life that I'm living right now. What do I do now? And that starts to take ownership over our choices and our decisions in powerful ways. And I don't know if it's Ben Franklin or whoever, I think it was Benjamin Franklin was talking about taxes. And he's like, yeah, the government will tax you. Nobody's going to tax you the way you tax yourself. And so what you all are doing is saying, no, we're going to stop the taxation of ourselves, and we're going to unleash this power that's going to grow and grow and grow from an acorn to a sapling to a giant oak wood or a redwood, whatever it is that you're growing over there that I totally want to be a part of and shine our spotlight on. I'm just so excited for the work you're doing. It's so authentic, and it comes from the core out. And so I just applaud you.
Right from the heart. Thank you.
Yeah, that means the world. Well, Steve, I've had one burning question. One thing you know about me, I think I've alluded to at some point, but Todd and Vanetta get tired of me talking about my love of music. And in talking marketing, I made reference to earlier, I'm wearing my amazing mental health marketing conference sweatshirt. And I think earlier on social media, I was telling you it was giving me the band Tool vibes from that band Tool, and you talk about the third eye, and the band Tool talks about the third eye, and so I had to put my Tool poster up behind me today to pay homage to your marketing efforts for the conference. So real quick, 1 minute, how did the logo come to be, infuse, instruct, all of the language and the terminology you brought to the marketing, and then we'll wrap up today's show. So real quick, how did that come to be?
Yeah, that sounds good. And thank you all for having me on. So it came to be from this idea that Todd touched on, actually, which is the idea of being seen. And I think we can get better about, introducing EMDR or ECT or other ways to try to care for people and their minds. But a huge power, at least in my experience, was sitting down in a safe space where somebody gives me room to be my honest, authentic me as best as I can, and let me search inside for my answers. And they guide me safely along through that process. And so I'm a wordsmith. Like I write every morning. And so playing around with a little alliteration always helped, but it was, intent. Why are you here? That's a big question for the audience. And we spent some money bringing a really great coach in to lead the audience through that kind of 30-minute exercise. And then instruct. Of course, we're here to learn, but really infuse. It's like, how do we bake this into our life now? We don't need to wait on this. So the I turned into this clarity that I've gotten, where I see the God in you and you see the God in me, this namaste kind of idea. And so working with the creative agency, Oswald Marketing, they helped craft those shirts and designed them and print them. And we're thankful for that. But that's how it came to be.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. My music aficionado and me got all giddy and excited when I saw it, and I knew I had to have at least one piece of merch. So, Dr. LaRosa, before we wrap up, any closing words? And then Steve, will give you one more chance to tell everybody where they could find you. But I don't think we've had enough time, and so maybe at some point in season 2, Steve, we'd love to welcome you back.
I'd welcome that.
Yeah, Dr. LaRosa.
Yeah. There's so many things I wanted to say, but we're running out of time. What I do want to say, Steve, is that you're so eloquent and you present this information from such a depth and level of profoundness. It's very clear that you have spent a great deal of your life trying to do good and to help others through these efforts. So, thank you for that. This has been an intellectual and inspiring conversation this morning, and it's left me with a wonderful feeling of relaxation. I don't know if people have told you that you do have that calming effect on others, but it's just been such a pleasure, and I cannot wait to attend the conference next year.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
thank
Todd,
you. So meaningful. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Todd, I told you Steve was a cool dude and that we'd all get along with him. And, I feel the same way all weekend. Frank, I was calm in his presence, as chaotic as the event was. But Todd, what are your thoughts as we wrap up?
Well, for now, we're in season 2. Vanetta stole all my notes
Oh, no.
on the closing remarks again. So
again,
I knew it.
I that's exactly, honestly, that's what I was really thinking about, was just it's refreshing to see again, another soul just being vulnerable and approachable. And that's what you're portraying. And you do it so well with your brand and your business, but you're the foundation of it, right? And you've put yourself there, which is amazing. Number one, as a power player in the space, and just spreading, kindness, and it's very welcoming. And that's what we need more of. As we've been talking about, we need people to feel safe, that they can share their emotions, and it's a sign of strength, not weakness. We've all checked our tough box. I'll keep talking about it all season and probably for the rest of my life, on how we've all experienced something traumatic in our lives and we've weathered through it. We're tough. So now let's pay attention to guys like Steve Turney and what you're doing, and just people, Dr. LaRosa in the space, and Chris, and really play on it. Let's just be vulnerable, approachable. It fosters trust, empathy, and love. And that's where we're going to win this battle all the way through, because love wins. So
yeah,
there's my
love
closing remark. Top that, Dr. LaRosa.
I can't top that, and love does win. And I will just say, all the things you both said about Steve and the Mental Health Marketing Conference are all true, and I witnessed it in person. And we had 33 people over the 3 days give us interviews and share their story of vulnerability. That's extraordinary. And that just shows me that not only is the work we're doing with Walking Tall resonating with folks, but most importantly, Steve, the work you're doing is bringing great people together, working to break the stigma and, bring mental health to the forefront of society as it deserves. So before we sign off, let folks know where they can find you, how they can find out more information about the conference, anything you want to sell in respect to mental health. Now's your chance.
Awesome. Yeah. Two closing thoughts and then some wayfinding. So, Todd, I love that. There was a Harvard case study I read one time, and the gal said, hard on the problem, soft on the person. And I love that. We can have both of that, going back to kind of this yin yang approach. But also, one of my favorite quotes by Jung is the person that looks outside dreams, and the person that looks inside awakes. So just again, keep growing from the inside out. You can find us at M as in mental, H as in health, marketing.org, not .com. So mhmarketing.org. We just announced we're bringing it back to the factory at Franklin, Tennessee. We got lots of good love for that venue. It's going to be even better. They're pouring money into that place. I think $50 million of upgrades going in. And it's going to be September 30 through October 2. So the 30th of September through the 2nd of October. It's going to be a 3-day event. It's going to be probably bigger than ever based on the vibe and the mojo that we have right now. And then I'm big and sometimes incessant on LinkedIn, but it's because part of marketing is consistency. And that's really the secret that I've stumbled onto, is just take those steps day at a time, ship it. Good is the enemy of great. So just do good things every day, and then it compounds on its own. So find me on LinkedIn. You can just search for Mental Health Marketing Conference or Steve Turney, and I'd love to connect with you there.
Yeah, no, Steve, this has been just so inspiring, and just the welcoming environment you created for me when I was present, and the opportunity that Jennifer Christensen and Adrian Wilkerson at Beacon Media and Marketing provided. I just can't thank you enough. And so I also want to encourage listeners, please follow us, subscribe to our YouTube channel, check us out on all of our socials. We have a GoFundMe that we've created due to the folks at the conference. We never had a GoFundMe started, but after I was fortunate enough to be on main stage, I was 4 people running up saying, hey, how can we help? How can we give you money? I wasn't prepared for that. Just it goes to show the environment you're creating. So I can't thank the 3 of you enough. This has been invigorating. Steve, we're going to have you on again. There's so much more we need to get to. But before we sign off, there's always 2 words we want to tell our guests to live by for the next week. So if you would join us in those, we'd be honored. And everybody tune in next week. Have a great rest of your week, and walk tall. Walk tall, everybody.
Walk tall.
Walk tall. Walk tall.
Walk tall, everybody.